Hey, it's Dr. Ed Ernstrom here with Ernstrom Spinal Rehab, back again for Metabolic Friday. So, today we're going to just slightly recap on a couple of the subjects that we went over last week with metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. But more so, I want to get into the topic of insulin resistance because metabolic syndrome is kind of is a result of insulin resistance. So, when we get into this, I want you to just take a step back, think outside of yourself, and think in your own habits, and think about how you eat. Think about how often you're eating, the qualities of the foods you're eating, and also, why you eat those things and how often you eat those things. Were you trained that way? Do you think it's healthy? Is that what you read in a magazine? Is that what a doctor told you? Is that what a personal trainer told you to do? Or is it just one of those things you kind of fell into the propaganda of advertising? You're like, hey, I want that type of thing. So, insulin resistance, resisting insulin, kind of reverse engineer the words so that you can get an idea of that if something is resisting something, it doesn't want to accept it. So, what is insulin? First of all, insulin is the hormone that actually controls energy being put into your cells. So anytime you eat, specifically if you eat standard American diet, which is usually 40% fat, 40% carbohydrate, and about 20% protein, or maybe if you're trying to be healthy and going low fat, maybe you're eating 20% fat, 20% protein, and now you're at 60% carbohydrate, which is, again, anything over, anyways, we're not going to get into that right now. So that's another day, another topic. But let's start talking about whether you're having 40% of your diet comes from carbohydrate or not. What ends up happening when you eat the standard American diet, whether it's breads, pastas, bagels, muffins, pancakes, waffles, any of that stuff, rice, beans, vegetables, fruits, all of those things are made out of carbohydrate. And your brain, when you eat carbohydrate, has a response. And when it hits the tongue, you start making these enzymes that start the breakdown and absorption of sugars called amylase. But then you swallow it, and then it goes into your stomach, and you start breaking down and getting more absorption of those carbohydrates. Specifically, one we're going to get absorbed first is and usable is called glucose, because fructose. We're not going to get into that today. Fructose is a whole other subject that we're going to really dive deep into, okay? But glucose is the readily usable energy that we absorb, okay? It gets into the bloodstream, but then too much glucose in your bloodstream is toxic and is damaging, and that's what we find out when we get to type 2 diabetes, when there is too much sugar in your blood and you start getting neuropathies and all that stuff. So our body has a protective mechanism, and actually a very good mechanism. And it's this little organ that's between, okay, this is my left side, this is my stomach, this is my right side, and this is my liver. Right in between, there's this little organ, this little gland called the pancreas. And glands make hormones. And one of these hormones that it makes is called insulin. That's where it comes from. Okay, brain gets a signal, say, hey, we have sugar coming your way. It's going to get into the blood soon enough. Start making insulin. Insulin goes up when you eat. Now, getting to this again, on top of not just what you eat with the carbohydrate, but how frequently you're doing this, we've been taught by some healthcare professionals and dietitians, nutritionists, personal trainers, medical doctors, chiropractors, gurus, from about the mid-90s into probably until the last 5 years, and still being propagated today because it's an old message that never got to go away because some people are still living off of old information, that we need to eat more frequently. Why? Because that just increases your metabolism. Because if you want to have a high metabolism, you can lose weight and you can keep the fat down, because we want to look sexy and all this stuff. Well, what ends up happening is that each time you, one, eat carbohydrate, and then two, increase the amount of times you eat during your day, that's insulin spiking all through your day. Now, insulin will respond to carbohydrates pretty high. Now, insulin will respond to protein, mild to moderate, and will not really respond to eating fat. So if you're eating low fat, moderate protein, high carbohydrate, your quantity and quality and concentration of your insulin is going to be pretty high each time you're eating. So the idea of what ends up happening from there is that the insulin will then come to the cell membranes of all of your cells, and every single cell in your body has an insulin response. And insulin acts on every single cell. Why? Because cells need energy. It comes from glucose, comes from fats, and comes from proteins. But right now you have this flood of glucose that is in your blood right now. And so you need to get that glucose out of there as fast as possible. So you spike the insulin, get the insulin to put the glucose into the cells by unlocking the cell membrane, putting it in, and then ready to go next time you need to spike your glucose. Or if your cells are now used up all that energy, then the insulin can then unlock it again, put more sugar back into it, because your blood sugar should be at all times about 4 grams of total glucose to have a nice baseline healthy blood sugar. Also, if you aren't eating any sugar at all, or any carbohydrates, or any plants, or like some of my carnivore friends out there, they are going to still make sugar and maintain a healthy blood sugar, because there's something called gluconeogenesis, where they make glucose from your fats and proteins. Anyways, another day, another topic for that one too. So many things that I just really want to we could turn this into a 4-hour video, but we're not going to do that today. Okay, we're hoping to keep this under 15 minutes so that I can put this on Instagram. Anyhow, so now that we've increased the frequency and the intensity of our glucose, and that in turn turns into too high and too frequently of insulin, you start coming around to those cells too often, eventually they get full. So the cells are gonna, again, this is just an analogy, but this is actually what ends up happening. But so the cell has insulin getting ready to knock on the door again, ready to unlock the key to open the door and put more glucose in, but they're full, and so the cell ends up closing up the door, resisting insulin, saying, insulin, we're full, take that sugar to some other cell that doesn't need, that's not me, because I'm full, that might need that sugar. So go on to the cells that are still insulin sensitive, because I'm resistant. So now we started to create a problem, because if we're doing this every day, every week, every month, every year, for years, sometimes even decades, that is what leads to programmed insulin resistance. Now, when we have programmed insulin resistance, that's actually what drives us towards diabetes type 2 and prediabetes, and then those lead into other things like the metabolic syndrome and the heart disease that we talked about last week. So the idea is we need to now get back to insulin sensitivity, not be insulin resistant anymore. And I did promise that one of my patients that how this would relate to hypoglycemia. So some of the symptoms of insulin resistance, one would be hypoglycemic reactions. Now, I just talked about earlier that you always have enough sugar in your blood. You're not really hypoglycemic. You feel low on your sugars and low energy because the cells have been trained to be resistant. Now you can't get the energy into the cells, and so they're telling the brain, hey, we need food. And that you're going to be low energy as a signal to try to get you to think that you need to put new energy into your body so you can absorb it and then go through this whole insulin response thing again. But then again, their cells are insulin resistant, so it's just kind of what that'll end up doing, that is increasing the concentration of your insulin even more. And there's something in science called diffusion, or things will go from a high concentration to a low concentration. So if things are in a high concentration and you have all this more and more and more insulin, then eventually it's going to bully the cells to push the glucose in there. You do that too often, the cells will then become even more resistant because you're bullying them, right? And so that will lead to even more and more insulin resistance. And so hypoglycemia is a huge indicator of insulin resistance. Another indicator of insulin resistance is the inability to lose weight, or you lose weight and gets put back on pretty quickly. So especially central adiposity, or putting fat around our belly, or usually around our organs first, and then it goes everywhere else. So, moment on the lips, lifetime on the hips. Not so much. You actually, lifetime of the hips goes straight to the liver first and creates fat around your organs, and then eventually it goes everywhere else. Anyways, so hypoglycemia, fat, headaches. What are some of the other things? Anxiety is another thing that can come from that, because you just never have good control of your blood sugar, so it's going to be rushing up and down. Let's just say that there's a whole bunch of immediate symptoms of that. Hypertension is, again, part of that metabolic syndrome, but again is directly related, because water goes where sugar goes, not just where salt goes. And you actually end up retaining more salts because that you're holding on to more of that water to maintain a salt gradient, and because you're holding on to more water because of too much sugar. See where this is going? All right, so if you have any of these symptoms, you're insulin resistant. We're going to get into more topics later on about how we can combat insulin resistance and get into insulin sensitivity. I've been dabbling with the idea over the last couple days about now starting another series on Tuesdays called #IFInSTL. What does that even mean? It's about intermittent fasting. It's one of the ways that I've been combating my own insulin resistance for the last almost 2 years, maybe 22 months. This coming December will be my anniversary of beginning this path and journey, and I hope to kickstart you onto that too. Now, also, look forward to on my website, there will be a page coming up that will be talking about how to overcome insulin resistance, and some life coaching and some health coaching / weight loss programs that we're going to start offering here from my office via telehealth, and some of the pricing for that, but you can still get a lot of the information from these videos. But if you need that one-to-one direct coaching, or if you want to do group coaching, there's some discounts that I've been working on for doing group coaching to get more people involved. So always do better as a tribe. That is what we're going to go towards. But if you like the content from today, share this on Instagram or Facebook. If you're watching this from YouTube, make sure you hit the notification bell, so that you can get updates when I do post new videos. Put comments down below if you have questions more about insulin resistance, or just put those comments down below as well. Subscribe as well, so again, you can get this content, and also just put this on your own social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever floats your boat. But we look forward to seeing you guys next time. See you.